Hello everyone and welcome to the last webinar for this year 2021, and thanks everyone for being joining all the webinars and hearing about latest and greatest within the ADM and going through few of the basics primer sections which I had been covering from last 4 or 5 months. So with this, welcome everyone to this December 2021 Citrix ADM service monthly webinar. So who we have online today is myself, Avinash Pandey. I am from the Citrix ADM PM team, and we have our two of the very renowned Citrix technology professionals, Mads P. Peterson and Esther Burnett, who will be taking us through some of the very exciting sessions which I will be right now going to discuss in front of you in the agenda. First, we'll be covering through the overview of ADM service within first quick few minutes. Then we'll quickly switch over to Maths, where he will be taking us through the API gateway and its insight over the ADM service and showing us some very beautiful use case and the demo for it. Then we'll be switching to Esther. She will be taking us through the Stylebook automation use cases and the real field experiences and how she has used the Stylebook to solve a lot of difficult scenarios with very easy Stylebook automations. And the last one is a feedback session where I'm going to walk you through a feature which we are planning to incorporate onto the ADM service based on your feedback. We'll take it forward. So with that, I will quickly talk about how you can jumpstart to an ADM service with quick 3 steps for all those folks who are very new to the ADM or who are already using on-prem and yet thinking about the ADM service. You can start it with very quick 3 steps. First, you need to have a ADM service cloud service account. Once you have the cloud service account, you just have to select the ADM service in there, and then you just select in the mode as the agent built-in mode. What it does is that you don't need an external agent to get your ADCs being discovered onto the ADM. You just have to copy the service URL and activation codes and just feed it into the ADC, and yeah, your ADCs are discovered over the ADM for all the host of management and monitoring and analytics feature you want to explore. So what are the ADM service advantages? First, it's agile, which means it's very easy to operate. All the latest updates will be pushed in over cloud bi-weekly, which means you don't have to go through tedious process of getting approvals for your ADM, let's say on-prem to get, typically you have to get the approvals to get it and a downtime to get it upgrades. Those all things are gone days, and with service you have no say it being a cloud service, there is no hassle of HANDR. Second, it has a very faster time to value, as I was previously explaining, right? You have a very quick 3 steps to onboard and get your ADCs discovered, so it gets started with very few clicks. And then as we talk about, it has a very state of art advanced machine learning capabilities, which is very exclusive to ADM service, wherein based upon the application usage pattern and how the application and client side and the application server side response, ADM service machine learning engine continuously looks for those data and which is being fed in and devices a proactive approach if it figures out any issue or any anomalous behavior within the application processing. Then fourth one, it has a very lower operational cost. As I was talking about all these above 3 points, it leads to very less time and money and resources to manage the ADM or your ADC applications using the ADM service. Fifth, pretty much any ADC environment it supports, which means whether your ADC is hosted on a public cloud like GCP, Azure, and Amazon, or it is an on-prem, or it's a hybrid where it's mix of both, everything is supported on the ADM service. And last, any kind of application, whether it is a classic monolithic applications or more advanced and microservices, which everybody almost is adopting today, is supported for analytics and management monitoring purpose over the ADM service. So as I was talking about all the advantages, how to get started. As soon as you get started with, by default ADM service comes with a freemium version which is called as the Express tier, where in this Express tier what you get, Now we don't have any limitations over the number of virtual servers under the network functions or reporting, and even the configuration jobs, style books, everything has been opened up to unlimited, which were limited to 2 earlier in the Express. And of course, the analytics still sticks with the 2 virtual server license, so that you can onboard and experience and try out the analytics feature and the ML capabilities of ADM service. So what is the data retention? With the Express tier, you get a data retention of up to 500 MB or 1 day, whichever is lesser. Let's say you have experienced the analytics feature, and you are ready to deploy more applications with enable analytics for more applications, be it HDX Insight, SSL Insight, Web Insight, your ML based app security analytics. Everything now you can do by jumping into the advanced license, where you have to just buy the license for the virtual servers based upon the applications for which you need the analytics. And of course, in case you are constrained by the storage requirement, because sometimes we, as an enterprise policy, we need to host the data or store the data for some time, and it requires a greater storage over cloud. So we have a separate SKU for that to suffice your data storage need over the ADM service. So with this, I will move on the baton to Matt, and he will take us through the API gateway and the insights with a nice demo he has already planned. So Matt, over to you.
Thank you. So just make me presenter and I'll start showing.
Sure, Matt. I will.
Hi, everyone. Good morning or good evening. So I am from Denmark, which means it is about evening over here. So you should be able to see my screen now, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. So yeah, my name is Mads Petersen. I've been a consultant for 20 years. I'm just going to skip past these, doing mostly networking stuff. And I'm a bit of a hacker. So that's what I like to do. Now, what is an Citrix IPA gateway? Well, basically, it's a method that Citrix provided that allows us to configure the access point or the entry points to our APIs in an easy way using the ADM system. So the API gateway itself is a subcomponent of the ADM service, which basically just allows us to configure the ADC where the request is going to. So all the request is still going to the ADC where the API gateway is deployed onto, but to be honest, it's just services that have we always been configured on the ADC. So there is nothing really new and fantastic about that part, except that we can upload a Swagger document that makes it easier to configure the routing. But the cool stuff is the insight and how easy it is to deploy it now. And once we deploy it, we use Stylebooks. And if you've been to a lot of these webinars, I'm sure you know what a Stylebook is, but I'll just cover it briefly also. So what do we need to add an API to the gateway? Well, one of the cool new things is that we are able to upload a Swagger open API specification document, which is basically a document that describes in which way do your API allows communication. So getting the DevOps guys to provide the networking team with that information or automating it themselves really allows the ADM to deploy a solution that only allows traffic in the way that your document specified, making it much more secure because you're not getting traffic to anything that is not specified directly. When we upload the document, it has to be in a JSON or YAML format. There cannot be any external references in it, which I've seen before that will break the upload. The definition itself looks like this, and anyone that has done anything with the Swagger know their pet store, which is fairly famous for deploying our first API. But you can see we have different resource paths and different methods, HTTP methods. So we can do a post, or we can do a put, or we can do a get. And by defining each path with what method we want, we can again lock it down and secure the access to the API gateway. So what do we need when we need to add a new gateway? Well, we need an API proxy IP address, which is where the client traffic will go to. Those of you that does Netscaler will know this as a virtual IP address. This is where they connect to. So we need an IP address, we need a port, we need to define a TLS security. Citrix has some predefined categories of TLS security that you can select, and we need a certificate. Now this certificate can be one that you upload or in the certificate store on the ADM already. Next, we need to know where to send the traffic. This is your backend services or your upstream service. This is where the API lives. So you need to know the IP address and you need to know which port to communicate to it. And then we need our routing. So the routing document that we saw before can be used to create a pattern set on the Netscaler. A pattern set is a collection of entries. These can be URLs. So it will deploy a pattern set and set it has to be a member of the pattern set before we can give access to it. And then we save it and deploy it. Now, what happens when you deploy the gateway is that all of this good stuff essentially turns into a stylebook and then gets deployed. So a little information about a stylebook, because I'm not sure everyone knows it, is that first, my keyboard stopped working. First, a stylebook is declarative. That means that we say what we want the end product to look like. Now, if you imagine a house, you want 4 walls and a roof, a door and a couple of windows. And we don't really care how the builders build the house. We just care that the end product is 4 walls, a door, some windows and a roof. That's declarative. So we tell it how we want it to be, and then it's the ADM's job to make sure that it turns out how we want it to be. Next, a stylebook is what is called atomic. That means that everything has to be deployed or nothing is deployed. So if there is something that it cannot deploy, it will roll back everything. They are versionized. I don't have to explain that. They're composable. The best way I can explain that is think about Lego. You have building blocks that you can use to create something else. So you can have a building block that is an HTTP monitor or a monitor in general, and a building block that is a load balancer, and a building block that is a content switch. And with these building blocks, you can create a stylebook that allows you to deploy a content switch and a load balancer with a monitor in it. They are app-centric, which just means that you define an application that is extracted from some parameters. We generate some user interface, so you don't have to worry about it. Once you write the YAML yourself, then it will also generate the UI. And it's API driven, which just means that we can do everything API based. And Esther will come into much more about how to automate and use your stylebooks. So when we want to deploy it, it looks something like this. We have to give it a name, use a naming convention that makes sense because you can deploy a lot of stuff, and you have to give it the IP address and all that stuff. I'm just going to skip over these because I'll go into it in the demo also. And finally, a SAML. A YAML file looks like something like this. This is from the API deployment. So you can write these yourself, upload them, and then you can have a fully configuration. So let's switch over to my Chrome. Esther, can you confirm that you can see it? My Chrome is showing right.
Yes, it is showing right. Sorry
okay.
about that.
I got a little scared. There was silence.
Yeah, I didn't mean to do that.
Okay.
I thought I maybe lost connection. Okay, so this is the ADM. I am sure all of you are familiar with it. Under the security plane, we have something called the API gateway. And the first thing you notice is the API analytics. And this is where ADM really starts to give value for someone like me who's been doing ADCs for 10 plus years. Because one of the issues with the ADC, from my experience, is that people that do not use the ADC on a regular basis think it's a black box, and if something breaks, it's the ADC's fault. And again, from my experience, the ADC, once it's configured, is very seldom the cause for the issue. But we spend a lot of time trying to find out where the issue is. And this is where ADM is really a powerful tool, because it will take all the information that is already in the ADM and aggregate it into analytics that is easy to look to. So when we see here, the first thing is our analytics. We can see we have 4 instances and we have some endpoints. Now instances, that is an API of some kind, and endpoints, that's the backend service. We can see how much bandwidth we had. And we can see around 10 a.m. today, 5 of our APIs were lost. So something happened here. We can also see our top API instances, what the response time is, and the server response time. And we can click into them to see, here's our pit, to see even more information. How many requests did we have? What's the average response time? What's the server response time and the bandwidth? Which API endpoints were asked about the most? And again, we can click into it even more and see what was the response time and the server response time. So we get total response time for a request, and we can see the total number of requests and the bandwidth. And in my experience, this is so valued information that a lot of companies sadly don't have now, or they have some of it, but not at the same level. They don't have what the ADCs is doing. They maybe don't have the client side. They only have the server side. There is a geolocation in. We can also look at security. We can see if there's any authentication failures. We can see if there's some rate limiting. So if you want to limit the access to certain endpoints because they might get dust or something like that, then we can limit it. We can look into the SSL uses. We can see which kind of certificates are we using, what are the protocols we are allowing, which ciphers are we allowing, and the key strength. All of this very valued information, and allows us to see if we have clients connecting using an older protocol or something. So we will know if we can do TLS hardening to bring up the security of the TLS, or we might turn off some customers. So all of this analytics is right here. I'll go into web insight, which will give us even more. So if I look here, I can see we have some vServers and we have one deployment. Now the difference between a vServer and a deployment is that deployment is something we as an admin deployed ourselves, and vServers is something that the ADM discovered that could be an API. So that's the difference between them. And if I click into it, I can see that we have something that was found in the specification and something that was not. How many requests are there? What are the responses? 200 or 300 or 400 requests? All, again, very, very good information trying to troubleshoot what is going on if something is going wrong with your API. The definition is very simple, like the screenshot. We give it a name, we define the resource path, we define the method, and then we can use that to deploy our API gateway. The API proxy is just the access point into the into the ADC. Now the deployment itself is again very simple, and that's one of the strong suits with the ADM. You don't need 10 years of experience managing an ADC. You can get access to this and deploy it by a defined way from someone like me that created a Stylebook. So you can't really do anything wrong, except maybe typing in a wrong IP address if you don't use an IPAM. That's really all you can do, because all the other settings are predefined by someone who's done the ADC for a long time. So your DevOps guys or your junior admins, they don't have to worry. They can also deploy it. So the time from test to deployment is a lot shorter because we can move so fast. We don't need the senior guys. Like you see, we have an IP, we have the TLS profile, we have the upstream service, which again is just where is the traffic going to and which protocol, and we have some routing. And if you remember just before, I showed where it has 2 routing in the spec and 2 that wasn't. So these 2 were in the spec and the others wasn't. Now, one thing I didn't talk about or didn't have a slide about is the policies, because one thing is deploying your API. Another thing is trying to make it more secure. And again, Citrix made it very easy using policies. So we can give it a name. We can select a deployment. We can select where the traffic is going to, because you can have different kind of policies affecting different backends. So let's say you're trying to upgrade your server farm and you have a old web server that isn't able to handle as much traffic. Well, then maybe you want to rate limit it. And we can find and add a policy. And you can see here we have some resource paths. We have different methods. We can do a custom rule, and we can start to select our policies over here. We can do OAuth, which almost all APIs that I work with use OAuth in some form of manner. And if you're using OAuth, there is no reason why you shouldn't pre-validate that token on the ADC before it goes on the backend. So make sure to set it up. We can do OAuth basic. We can do application firewall, which basically just allows us to select a predefined application firewall profile and deploy it out again. A junior admin can do it because the senior admin has created the correct application profile, or application firewall profile. We can do bot management, which if you have premium and you haven't done application firewall, I would start with bot management, because it is such a powerful tool, and you'd be surprised how much traffic today is bots. And again, we select it, and we can do header rewriting, authorization, and deny stuff. So Citrix makes it very easy for us as an admin to create policies and deploy them to the API gateway. And we can see there is a policy already here. We do some rate limiting. We tell it which path it's on and what's the parameters. So what's the threshold and what's the time slice, and what kind of limit type is it, burst or smooth, and is it a response or whatever. It really makes it easy to deploy policies. And again, if we want to deny access to certain part of the API, we can do it here. It's very, very smooth and easy to do. Now let's look a little more on the inside. So I have an application here that is called Pet Store. I can search it through, and right here on the first page, we can see that it has a score. This is 73 out of 100, so not the best, but not the worst. And the ADM will try to help you why it's not on running. And there are some issues with the SSL configuration. So we are not using an A+ profile, and it's easy to deploy an A+ profile from the ADM. And we can see on the content switch, again, no A+ profile. So all of this brings the score down, and we could find this in the ADC also, but this just gives us a very good overview. We can go into the matrix and we can see what the I'll just try to go back in time a little. So you could see it was at 1 day. Now it should hopefully bring back a week. Yeah, so Avinash, she talked about the ML based, and you can see here there is one thing that has found the ML base, something that was out of the normal scope. And this blue barrier you can see here, that is what the ADM has learned. That is the normal throughput for your application. So if something starts to spike out of it, we as a human would almost never see it. But the AI and the ML based is able to catch these things.
Yeah,
So
this is the machine learning kicking in, right?
Yeah. Yes, correct.
Exactly.
So yeah, and with very, I mean, one thing is for the throughput, but machine learning is even more important when we go over and talk about security and application firewall and bot management and account takeovers, because they can just see patterns much better than we can. But look at all this information that is just throwing at you. This is something that would be so hard to find on the ADC, and someone that's really only does ADC, I would spend so much time trying to dig out this information because it is there, but finding is very hard. So this is, for me as a consultant, this is where the real value of the ADM is in the analytics. And if we go into the web insight, we can dig down even further and see what a client was, hopefully. Come on. I'm just going to go back. There's the demo, guys. I'll take it in another way, because instead of going that way, I can go up to transaction logs, and then I can get a detailed overview of a transaction. And this is where, again, with the ADM and the ADC that is placed right in the middle of your traffic, you get to see both sides of the connection, the client side and the server side, but also equally important, how is the ADC doing? Is it starting to have a processing time that is very high? So on the client side, we can see when did it start, what was the OS. This was a Python request. This is a demo tenant, but we get all the information here. We can see that which cyberstring that you, what did the ADCs tell us? What was the virtual server name? What was the IP address of the NetScaler DNS IP address? And what was the server? Was there any server response that was lagging? Where did it go to? Was it a GET request? And all of this stuff is thrown at you in a very clear way. And it's easy to look into different browsers and all of this stuff. So you can, if it has seen other than a Python request, you could have clicked into it and found other traffic. So it's a very, very strong feature, this one.
Yeah, that will make troubleshooting a lot easier, Melts.
Yeah, I've been at customer engagements where they had ADM, but they didn't and they used the on-prem, but they didn't really use it to analytics. And by setting up analytics, and within like an hour after we started collecting data, we could see, we could pinpoint where the issue was because the connection was slow. And that would have taken me a lot longer to try to figure out by hand.
Exactly.
So it is
on point.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it is, I cannot recommend it enough. So the last thing I want to show you is another troubleshooting tool. So if we go over here, we can see there's a global graph, which basically just shows all the connection into your ADCs and where they're going to. But if we go to microservices, and I put this up to, let's say, a week. We can see here that we have some connections that is going into, and while it's green, it's everything is fine. The ADC that is hitting is yellow. That means there is something you should look at. And when it's red, there is an issue. And you can actually click on these and go into the app dashboard or view in details or do trace info. So I can actually go into it and start to dig down into what was the issue at that time. It was the response time. And we can see, again, this is a demo environment, so if you have response times that are 2-3 seconds, you might have an issue. But even in this demo environment, we had response times that was higher than 5 seconds. So already I could see that there was an issue at this point, and I can dig down to it even further and find the specific time very, very easy. And that allows us to troubleshoot much faster, and it brings us so much value. I think that was the final part for me. Esther, are you ready to tell us about automation?
Yes, of course. Excuse me, just let me see if I can.
Let me make you presenter.
I think I can.
There you go.
Yeah, let me see if I can figure this out.
We are seeing the other screen.
Yes, I was I was already worried about that. Hang on, let me just select the right screen.
Sure.
So now you should be able to see the slide deck.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. So now I'll make sure to not make the same mistake as this morning and pausing it. I'll just focus on getting us through the slides. So for me, I feel very honored to be here and to share with you some of, well, the use case and field experience that, and mostly the fun that I had creating Stylebooks. So let's dive into. First, let me quickly give you a short introduction of myself. As some of you may already know, I've been around as a solutions architect or IT consultant for quite some years now in end user computing. I've had the honor of being part of a lot of different community programs. Very proud of that, not to show off all these cool labels, but to once again show you that it's so important to share your experience with the community and to give back, because I think that is the true power of the Citrix community that we're having today. Mostly focused on virtual apps and desktops way back. And for the last 10 years, also including networking and having a lot of fun automating configurations and deployments, especially for the Citrix ADC and last couple of years ADM as well. I care about user experience because for me that determines the success of the projects that I'm doing, but definitely have to keep a fine balance with security settings as well. Some of you may already know that I do love to script any kinds of automated actions or build DevOps pipelines to get the job done automatically. And in those spare moments that I still have time to relax, as of this summer, you can definitely find me behind the barbecue because I love just preparing different meals on my little Kamado Joe Jr. So that's a quick insight on my person. Let's get back to the fun stuff, to ADM and how it can definitely help you in your automation adventures as well. So in this case, I had a customer that is very focused on network segmentation. So what they requested is that we created a different ADC for each and every functionality or feature that they wanted to use of it, because they wanted to make sure that, and let me quickly just get the laser out to help you understand it. So they basically wanted to make sure that they were in full control of the entire application network flow, but still have that added security by segmenting the network and making sure that each ADC with its own feature was positioned in a particular network segment. So in this case, incoming traffic would first hit the SSL offloading ADC, which is definitely in the DMZ zone, and then it would be sent to the application firewall, which would be a separate ADC sitting in its own network segment, but still, of course, in the DMZ. And then if that all works correctly and the application firewall feature set would kick in, then it would be transitioned to the presentation layer, so to speak, where it's mostly focused on load balancing, in this case, usually web services. And in case the web services would also need to contact application servers, we would also have separate ADCs to provide that application load balancing. And as you can see, it goes all the way down to having a separate ADC for resource servers and even transfer servers. So you can imagine that this is quite a complex setup to configure. Even if we're doing it manually, it would require us to be very careful about making sure that we not just hit the right backend web servers, but we also make sure that the application firewall is redirected or directed to the right presentation virtual server. And the same goes for the SSL offloading. So if we're doing this manually, it definitely means that we need to keep track of all the different IPs and make sure that those are linked correctly to support the full application flow through these different ADC appliances. So that in its own is already a challenge, and translating that requirement into a style book was definitely a challenge that I love to dive into. So for the demo purposes, I'm just focusing on these three components or these three ADC features and the web services and making sure that that is configured. But the style book that is shown in the demo still supports all these other components and segmentations as well. So to not just, as Matt already said, to not just focus on PowerPoint, but dive into demos. I do have to admit that in this case, I pre-recorded it to make sure that it's as fast as possible and allows me to just be the narrator and still have focus on what we're seeing. So this at the beginning of the demo is still me explaining all those different network segmentations and the different challenges, because now I wanted to create, or I'm tasked with creating, a style book that makes configurations on multiple ADC appliances. And I'll show you the magic in just a second. So as mentioned before, what you see here is in my demo environment, I don't have all the network segmentation, so I'm still using the same network segment or subnet. But in this case, I'm zooming in on the style book. And what you see is that it still has these clear sections where you can easily add the information that you need for the SSL offloading, for the application firewall, and presentation. And with that presentation functionality, that load balancing, it also gives you the opportunity to easily add those web servers that are sitting in the backend and need to be load balanced. In this case, I'm adding a blue server. And I also added an additional option in the style book to make sure that I could specify whether or not that backend server was already existing on the ADC. Because in some cases, we are reusing the same web services in development environments. So I needed to make sure that. And this is the cool part, because stylebooks also give you the option to specify certain roles. And that allows you to apply a subset of the stylebook configuration to a specific ADC instance, or an ADC instance that is assigned to that role. So hitting create will magically ensure that a configuration pack is created for this particular stylebook setup. So if we're zooming in on the objects that are created in the configuration pack, you see application firewall, you see presentation. Once again, those roles are very visible again, SSL offloading, and you see all the different instances and configurations that are created on those 3 ADCs. So this is me quickly zooming in on the different ADC configurations. In this case, it's the presentation ADC. And of course, in front of that, we have the application firewall, which also has its vServer configured with all the additional settings as well. So in this case, you see the application firewall, vServer, and the service group, once again, directing to that presentation server, vServer, that we created on the other ADC. So you can imagine that this already means or will help us make sure that we are not breaking that application network flow by ensuring that those references to the right vServer IP addresses are made automatically. So this is that last ADC that does the SSL offloading, or basically the first ADC in the entire application flow. And as you can see, that also has the load balancing functionality in place. And I even made sure that HTTP requests are redirected to HTTPS. Quickly checking, if I go to the SSL offloading virtual server, if it indeed ends up all the way through to the presentation load balancer that does the load balancing of those 2 web services that I previously specified in the stylebook. And the cool part about stylebooks and the configuration packs is that they can dynamically be changed, and those changes will easily be translated to configuration changes of the AC. In this case, we had the blue server, the blue web server, added to the configuration. I'm now removing that from the configuration pack. You now see the engine making all the changes to the ADCs. In this case, it's of course mostly focused on that presentation. But if I now keep hitting refresh, it should only show me the green server. And once I realize that, so this is not just a one-time change that you can make, you can easily add that server back in case you made an error. So what you're seeing is me adding that blue server once again, just hitting create for the web server. So it's added to the configuration settings, and then with hitting OK, it now updates the configuration pack and the settings on the ADC. Once again, double checking, going back to the web server or the website, doing a refresh, and that blue server is once again being hit by the load balancer. So this is just a quick way to show you that basically we are combining the experience and knowledge of what Mats already explained, a senior administrator. And in my case, of course, I do have some help of having some knowledge of scripting and creating stylebooks. But that also allows junior administrators, or maybe even developers that just want to be able to quickly set up a test environment, still using that network segmentation that is very important for this customer. and then just be able to use that. Well, I still call the Stylebook a fill out form, but to use that to quickly set up their test environment and make sure that everything is working as is to be expected in the production environment, but still have that freedom to make their own tweaks, etc. So that's one of the things that I really love about using Stylebooks. And I think, Mats, you also had an awesome experience in using Stylebooks with multiple ADCs that you would love to share.
Yeah, one of the last assignments I was on was for a customer with 4 data centers around the world. And they wanted to start using global server load balancing, which can be a little daunting from a lot of them, but we actually managed to create, well, 2 Stylebooks in this case, one that would handle all the site, all the web configuration, and another Stylebook that would deploy applications in a global server load balancing. So right now that customer is able to deploy a new application in a global server load balanced environment in around 2 minutes, which is
That's what
just
I love.
amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the power of Stylebook.
Yeah, I think that explains how powerful Stylebooks are. And I think that's a nice introduction to just one more quick demo that I would love to show as well. Oh, hang on, let me just get back because I'm getting way ahead of myself. Because one of the other things that I did realize when creating the Stylebooks is that it still used a graphic user interface. It still used that form. But especially nowadays when we're talking about developers and DevOps and getting everything in code, it's also very important to be able to support an automated way of creating those configuration packs based on a Stylebook. So the other thing that I accomplished for this customer was to make sure that they also understood in an automated way how they could create those same configurations with that Stylebook. So this is just a quick demo to show you using that same Stylebook that I previously demoed, as you can see here. But instead of filling out this entire form, I wanted to have an automated option as well. So I could basically combine having the junior admins or less experienced admins fill out the GUI, fill out the Stylebook in the console, but also allow developments and DevOps processes and workflows to automatically push that same configuration. In this case, I'm using the Nitro API documentation that basically states in order to call a Stylebook in an automated way, I need to provide 3 pieces of information, which are clearly available in the management console: the namespace, the name, and the version. And that is part of the URL that I'm going to use, or the URI in this case, that I'm going to use for my REST API call. So quickly going back to the documentation, because there are a couple of more pieces of information that I need. First of all, the HTTPS method. In our case, it's a post. And very important, the request payload, which is in a JSON format. And in this case, it specifies that I need to specify a configuration pack and then the parameters and the targets. Going back to my script. So I already created a payload with configuration pack and parameters in there. And then I can fully understand if it's not directly clear where I found all these parameter settings that I put into this section of the JSON code. So let me quickly go back to the YAML file that I used to create this Stylebook, because then it very quickly becomes clear where those where that information is coming from. So what you're seeing is, in this case, it's the parameter definition in the Stylebook, and it starts with that general object, then moves down to app name. So you can see that once again reflected, because these are the parameters that you basically fill out with that form. And now we need to make sure that the JSON also pushes that same information to our stylebook. And as you can see, there's also a section for the SSL offloading, app firewall, and presentation, which are also objects declared within that parameter section of this YAML file. So this is the application firewall section, and then presentation. And within presentation, you noticed with the form that we used it to also specify the web servers and the servers itself by specifying a server name, a server IP address, and even the port and whether or not it's an existing server. So what you see here is that same information is now added to the JSON file as well, making sure that that payload has all the required information. And then, of course, there's the targets section. So once again, what you saw in the Stylebook is that it had these different target roles. And here you see those clear names, the SSL offloading, application firewall, and presentation. So all I need to do is make sure that I link the ID of my appliance back to that specific target role. So this is just a quick script that will call that script file. So basically it's a workflow. And what you see is that within seconds, it has retrieved all the device IDs of those different ADC appliances. It created that payload with all the information and details. And it even gave me back a configuration pack ID. And that already shows to me that everything was working as expected and a configuration pack was created. Because you can easily check in the console the configuration pack ID. And we can even once again zoom in exactly in the same way as we used to fill out the stylebook, all the different objects that were created on the ADCs. And just to make sure, because I love that visual confirmation, once again, I have that same configuration that I showed in the first demo. So I easily have that load balancing with an SSL offloading, application firewall, and then the presentation, ADC appliances and features in front of it. And with that, I just added one additional slide because this morning in our session, or at least for me, it was this morning. For some, it was still in the middle of the night or early in their evenings. So I got the question if the code is available for the stylebooks. So this is just a quick reference, shameless plug of my GitHub repository that still has that code. As you can see, it is a bit dated. So feel free to reach out in case you have any questions or if you're running into any errors. I'd be happy to help you get even more fun with automating stylebooks as well with the ADM.
Yeah.
So that's it for me.
Perfect.
Back to you.
I just have a follow-up. Just a follow-up thing, because this really shows that you can get your DevOps guys involved in deploying stuff on the ADCs where they had to wait and create tickets before. Now we can allow them access to deploy in a controlled manner because it is predefined. So very good stuff. Thank you.
Yes. And it even ensures that we have that versioning for our stylebooks as well, because there's also an easy way to push these stylebooks to your ADM in an automated way. So that gives you like a full circle experience.
That's a really good use case you have shown. So maybe a lot of people would be interested. So if you have the link ready, maybe you can post it over the chat as well, so that if attendees want to visit your GitHub, they can definitely go in there and connect with you offline as well if they need any help there.
Perfect. Then feel free to take over the presentation, and then I'll copy the link into the chat.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Esther. So let's quickly move to the last section where I want to take a quick feedback on one of the features which we are planning to introduce on the ADM service based, but it's a very early discussions, but I really wanted to have the attendees feedback as well to understand how they feel about this feature. So with this, let me show my screen. Okay, so this feedback is about a feature which we are trying to go in is with the Citrix WAF or the App Security Configuration Map, meaning let's say you have hundreds of ADCs deployed with wherein you have couple of few hundred applications for which you have the application firewall being deployed. Now you want to understand the footprint of it and want to know what all features are enabled over which all applications. So that is the why. So a lot of time, security being the prime focus, because most of us have started working from work from homes, and literally our home has become office, and applications which were earlier only open or being used for your daily work at the office now has to be opened up over the internet. So this calls for a greater security to secure those applications. So this audits for the security team often checks what all applications are behind the WAF, and what all kind of checks are enabled, whether these checks suits the application need, and 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 actually covers all the security aspects for that application by getting it audited with the application owners. So that is a why. Now, what all details we are planning to capture in here is, of course, the NetScaler IP, the LBV server IP, the WAF policy, and the profile name, and of course, what all checks are enabled, so that in a one glimpse we can understand and have all the details captured in a one report. So today also you can do it, but it requires you to be having a person with a DevOps who has a good hold on Python. Then you run a series of APIs like pulling out what all LBs have the WAF policies bound, and then subsequently you try to fetch out the profile, and then you try to check in the security checks under that profile, which gives you a very holistic view post developing a database with the help of scripts and to view those details. So those simplification we wanted to bring in. If we can have a simple API which, rather than running a series of API, if we have a simple API which can fetch this detail in one shot. And another thing we are looking out for is the UI enrichment, where we can maybe evolve into a service graph which includes all the maps with a single export capability. So this is something how right now, if you do an API with a series of API, maybe you can see. So this is what we are planning. So based on that, I really wanted to launch a poll and to understand and get your feedback whether these kind of reports will really help you as an administrator or as a part of team which holds responsibility of the security posture of your applications being posted over internet.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. Community work is what we do a lot of in CTP, so it is my pleasure. Anything to give back to the community?
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Esther. So with this, everyone, we are now ending up this webinar. See you again in the next year, January month webinar. So with that, I would wish you everyone a very happy new year. See you next year. Thank you, everyone. Good day. Bye-bye.